Welcome to the Voices of Black Rock. We're your hosts, Asili,
Angie,
Jordan,
Cassidy,
and John.
we are so glad you joined us.
Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Asili.
Hi, I'm John.
We are your hosts for today's episode of Voices of Black Rock.
Today we will be discussing our return to normal from the pandemic.
Return to normal? Will we ever be normal again?
Well, that's what we'll talk about today. We will be talking to Miss Carrie Ramanauskas, the head of social emotional learning in Bridgeport Public Schools. And Asili will talk to Black Rock's own guidance counselor, Miss Kylan Farrell. Asili, what do you think normal is going to look like next year?
I think normal will be like it used to be pre-pandemic, but with masks on.
Do you think kids are going to have any extra anxiety returning to normal?
Yes, because we have been locked up for ages, and most kids haven't interacted with other people.
I think it's going to be a bumpy ride returning to normal. Stay tuned to listen to Miss Ramanauskas explain how Bridgeport Public Schools' social emotional learning plan can help all students as we return to normal.
Also, you will hear from Ms. Farrell about how our school, Black Rock School, will support other students during this nerve-wracking return to normal.
Hey, it's John here with Ms. Ramanauskas. And can you introduce yourself to our listeners and describe your job?
Absolutely. So my name is Mrs. Carrie Ramanauskas, and I am the Bridgeport Public Schools Social Emotional Learning Coordinator here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I have the privilege of co-chairing our district-wide SEL task force. I get to work with district leadership, school administrators, staff, students, families, and our community partners to develop, implement, and sustain restorative practices and the ruler approach in order to increase our cultural competence, emotional intelligence, and trauma-informed practices through the district and our entire Bridgeport community. Before I began working in this role, I was a middle school English teacher and a high school English teacher. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for coming. And do you think the students will need more social emotional support as we return to normal?
Absolutely. I think students and the adults who work with them and support them both in school and at home, I think we all are going to need a little bit of social emotional support and the ability to really work with each other and openly express and communicate our feelings, whether those are pleasant feelings or some more challenging feelings. So definitely, I believe some of those supports will be needed. And luckily, we've already started to bring in additional supports to help our students navigate the challenging times that might arise when coming back from such a challenging experience that COVID has had on students in the classroom at all age levels, as well as the adults that work to support them.
Okay, and how much emotionally do you think kids have been impacted by COVID? Like, have they become less social because they've been cooped up at home?
Well, I think there's been a number of impacts, and from students that I work with, because one of the things I do in my role is I work with student groups across all age levels. So I've visited all 38 schools here in Bridgeport and had the opportunity to talk directly with students. So some students are reporting some more pleasant feelings, like being able to work at their own pace has given them a sense of calm and comfort. And even if they're in-person learning, I think teachers have been flexible in terms of time frames while giving deadlines, but then also supporting those deadlines with scaffolding that maybe previously wasn't offered. Students, both at home and in person, have reported anxiety about health, community health aspects, So making sure that we have scientific facts that we're actively sharing within the community, showing how our schools are working to keep students safe and their parents safe when we need them to be part of the educational process. And parents have been extremely cooperative and supportive to school-based staff. Students have also mentioned feeling a level of anxiety or feeling overwhelmed with all of the additional digital requirements of them. So students have said, and in addition to their everyday coursework, navigating new platforms, dealing with frustrations related to internet connection or dropped signals when you're trying to watch video that your teachers developed or assigned to you, some of those frustrations have come to light. But one of the advantages is that now we've been working on developing strategies on how to overcome some of those more difficult feelings or how to maintain some of those pleasant feelings. And I think that both educational leaders as well as community members have realized the importance of social emotional health of students in addition to the academic needs that students and their families both have.
Mm-hmm. And what advice would you give to students who are feeling anxious and like unmotivated and all these different feelings?
Advice I would have is communicate and express those feelings. Find your good friend that you could truly be yourself with. Find that trusted adult to share some of those more challenging feelings, and then work on specific strategies. When we practice strategies before something happens, it's a lot easier to use those strategies in high emotional times. So if you practice strategies when you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, and you could do that through maybe reading a character within a class, learn those skills, and then practice them when the time arises where you might be nervous about trying something new, or you might feel like everything, you have multiple assignments coming at you at once. Then you could practice maybe, some deep breathing, get that oxygen flowing, create a list to prioritize what you need to accomplish. And then that feeling of crossing things off as you accomplish those goals has been proven to heighten the feelings of pleasantness. Also, practicing gratitude has increased more pleasant emotions, and it puts you in a more positive mindset to overcome some of those challenges or obstacles that you may face. So those would be a couple of the tips and tricks that I would share with students.
Okay, I think those were all the questions for today, but thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and anytime I'd love to come back. I even have some student ambassadors that might love to speak to you sometime if you're ever interested.
Yeah, we might be someday.
Great.
Right.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
You too.
I'm here with Miss Farrell, Black Rock School's guidance counselor. So, Miss Farrell, what is one tactic that you will be able to use that will help kids who need it?
So that's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is mindfulness strategies. So there's lots of different definitions of mindfulness, but the one that I like to think of is that mindfulness basically means practicing being totally present. So not worrying about the future and also not dwelling on things that might have been really hard about the past. So mindfulness practices are things that teach us how to kind of quiet our thoughts, be present within ourselves, and try to avoid anxious thinking. So some examples of mindfulness practices would be breathing techniques, learning to slow your heart rate through breathing, things like yoga. If you like movement, yoga is a way of moving and being mindful at the same time. Things like guided meditations, visualizations, progressive muscle relaxation. And another thing that can be mindful that I think is especially important right now is having a gratitude journal. So a gratitude journal could involve writing at the end of every day 3 things that you're really grateful for that happened that day, and also 1 thing you're really excited about for the next day. So practicing gratitude is especially a great way to take your mind off of the things that might be really difficult, because obviously there have been a lot of things that have been difficult about this school year, but also, taking count of the things that you're still really appreciative for and the things you're excited about still.
Okay, have you seen any changes with students since the pandemic?
Yeah, so the pandemic's definitely caused a lot of changes in people's lives, and I do think I've seen some changes in students, kind of in both directions. Some students have really surprised me with how resilient they've been, and resilience is something that is important in young people and in everyone. So some students actually really, showed that they made a routine for themselves. They kind of embraced the independence of remote learning and, kind of taking control of their own learning schedule and the responsibility that comes with that. And adjusted with resilience to all the challenges that the pandemic faced. On the other hand, other students did display heightened anxiety, which is something that would be, totally acceptable and normal considering that a global pandemic happened. So I really saw both ends of the spectrum, and I think it's really about just meeting students where they are along the spectrum of either, having adjusted okay to things, or if they're struggling and having some anxiety about things. It's just meeting students where they are and feeling out, if they need some extra support or not.
Is there any specific goal that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, so I think, do you mean specifically related to school after the pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one goal would be for students to know that there's support staff in this building who are here for them. I think sometimes myself and the school social worker and the school psychologist, the support staff in the building, sometimes students don't know who we are because we're not here every day of the week, and because there's just the three of us in a school of about 500 kids. So one thing that would be my goal is to be more visible in the school going forward, for more students to know that we're available for them as resources. And essentially the goal is for students to have a comfortable adjustment back into school next year, where there won't be remote learning anymore, at least what we know at the moment, and hopefully adjust back into a more quote-unquote normal school experience, kind of like what we had before the pandemic.
Are you going to have any support groups to help you talk to every student in the school?
Right, so that's a great question. I definitely do groups with students. Sometimes the groups are based on different things depending on what the students need support with. But just myself in particular, being one person in a school of 500 kids, it would be almost impossible for me to have a group with every student. So that's why, the school social worker also run groups. Sometimes the school psychologist and I have wondered if we can partner up for groups together next year. But I do think that groups are a great way for students to collaboratively talk about what they're experiencing, what they're going through, any difficulties that they might, collectively be sharing, to talk about how they can work through that together. One thing that might involve groups, that might not involve groups, that we're thinking about for next year is sort of reworking our tiered approach to supporting students. So there's essentially 3 tiers or levels of supporting students. The first is just universal support across the whole school, which essentially every adult in the building is responsible for. So teachers, support staff like me, the administrators, just checking in with students on a daily basis and seeing where they are. So we have, a new plan for next year that would involve a daily check-in with students, I think probably related to the mood meter, to see just how everyone's doing on a daily basis. Then a second tier would be a little more intense intervention, so that could involve check-ins with a support staff member as needed. It could involve groups. And then a third tier would be even more intense intervention, and that could involve more regular check-ins, more structured support services with one of the mental health professionals in the building, and it could also involve collaboration with outside community providers that provide mental health support or well-being support to students, because that's also a big part of our role here in the school, is making sure that we're also working with people in the community so that students are supported in school and out of school.
Okay, thank you very much for letting us interview you. And sorry for taking your time, but thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a great time. Thanks.
We hope listening to this episode has made you feel more confident about our return to normal.
I know Miss Ramanowskis and Miss Farrell impressed me. I'm thankful we have them on our team.
You know, Cassidy, I know we got this. We will be okay on our journey back to normal.
You're right, Asali. We are strong. So are our listeners.
Thanks for listening today and throughout the season.
We really want to thank Miss Moore and Miss Welch, who each helped us support putting this podcast together.
And don't forget all of our fabulous guests. We want to thank them.
All of our listeners have really helped us get our voices heard.
Make sure to stay safe this summer and remember to join us for season 2 dropping next school year.
Bye!